Today's episode is on point combination with David Hartmann. David is an acupuncturist and has been practicing since 1997. He has postgraduate qualifications in acupuncture with both a master's degree and a pending PhD. David is also a well-known lecturer here in Australia at the Endeavour College of Natural Medicine and has recently started to teach over in the UK in their master's degree. He is a researcher and a writer with 2 published books. His most recent publication was The Principles and Practical Application of the Acupuncture Point Combinations, which was published in 2019. And he's also the author of the Acupoint Dictionary, which was published in 2009, and that was my go-to book as a new graduate. David has presented at multiple conferences throughout the USA, Germany, England, Poland, Australia, and New Zealand, and is forever learning and growing as a practitioner. David was also one of my lecturers back when I was studying acupuncture in 2008. So let's make him welcome to the podcast and chat point combinations. A space for conversation around women's health through the lens of naturopathic and Eastern medicine. I am Sandy Ross, and this is her Earth Medicine Podcast. This podcast is multi-leveled. Episodes for patient education to graduate practitioner level. Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you gain value from this episode. Welcome to the podcast, David Hartmann.
Hi, Sandy. Thanks for the opportunity. It's really exciting.
It's great to have you here, David. And for those of you who don't know David Hartmann, he is a great acupuncturist and taught me, I think, over 15 years ago when I was in college back in the day. So, David, for those of our listeners that aren't familiar with your amazing work, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey as a TCM practitioner?
Yeah, sure, Sandy. Thank you. I started studying nearly straight out of school, which is a bit unusual in Australia. Most acupuncture students seem to be mature age. But I started studying in 1993 and finished in 96. So I've been practicing for quite a while now. Actually, that seems like a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Scary. I also did a Masters of Acupuncture as well, which I finished in 2009. I was teaching at the Australian Institute of Applied Sciences. I started there in 2000, and over the last 20 years I've been teaching either at the AIAS or at Endeavour College in Brisbane, Australia, and I'm also now teaching at the Northern College of Acupuncture in New York in England in their Masters online program. So lots of teaching. I've written a couple of books. I've written some courses as well, a couple of Diploma of Tuina or Chinese Acupressure Massage courses, an Advanced Diploma of Acupuncture course, and also a Bachelor of Acupuncture. So I guess I'm quite academically minded, but I also have been treating as well since I graduated in 1997. And my interest was originally in sports, musculoskeletal, but has definitely been over the last 10 to 15 years more within emotional turmoil, mental health stuff as well. And before COVID, I was doing a lot of international travel to do my workshops overseas and teaching at conferences. COVID sort of slowed that up, obviously. So I'm doing a lot of online stuff as well.
You're a busy man.
Yeah, it does sound busy, doesn't it?
Definitely. Okay, so I certainly remember you as one of my lecturers with that Shen component a lot, but today we're going to be diving into another aspect I certainly remember you by, is your point combinations. So can I start by asking you, how did you get into developing point combinations for acupuncture?
When I went through college, I didn't have an iPad or a laptop. I don't even know if it existed back then. I wrote everything down in booklets, and when I graduated, whenever I had spare time between patients, I pulled out everything from those books, little point combinations that lecturers gave me or that were in other textbooks as well. And they kind of became this clinic folder that I referred to. And when I started teaching in 2000, I showed it to some students and they went, this stuff is really, really good. Can we have it? So from there, I guess the Acupoint Dictionary was created from that, but it also became a sense of we can give you information as lecturers or as authors, but I think there's also this component where you should also be encouraged to figure it out yourself as well. And so that's kind of how it all sort of started. And so the two books I guess we'll talk about later cover both those aspects. One just gives you the answers and the other one, I guess, teaches you how to figure out how to construct your own point combinations. So it's been an ongoing thing really for over 20 years.
Yes, and I've got your Acupoint Dictionary with me right here, and it's one of the books that I took over with me when I practiced in Bangkok for 4 years, and it was certainly a lifesaver for me because I didn't have too many texts over there, so such a great book. Now, I know you're big on using specific needle numbers and positioning and stuff with your acupuncture points. So can I ask you about, before we dive into the point combinations, how many needles you like to use and why is that?
I use sort of between 8 to 16 needles in total. I tend to write the word needle or mention the word needle because if I say points, it gets confusing because then people go, well, hang on, are you doing bilateral needling or not? And if I say 8 points, then people will say, is it 8 points or is it 16 points? So I tend to refer to it as needles. So 8 to 16 needles has been sort of the average, I guess, over the last... Because I started treating in 1994 in the student clinic. So really, from 1994 to now, that's how long I've been going. And that just seems to be sort of around about the low end and the high end. I feel like anything less than 8, I haven't really done enough. I'm probably given the body enough information. And we'll talk about that kind of combination of points in a minute as well, I guess. But anything more than 16, I feel like you're almost giving the body too much information or you're forcing it to work too hard. And maybe the body isn't able to handle that sort of amount of information that you give it. Now, I know that everyone's different. I've got a friend in Israel that uses one needle. And it's a different needle depending on the condition. And then I've got some students that have graduated that will use 40, 50 needles. So everyone's different and everyone can get great results potentially, but I've just found that seems to be a nice little pocket. From my clinical experience.
Okay. I mean, that's the beauty of acupuncture. We can all use our unique techniques and still get great results, but it is good to have an idea for those that are learning and, you know, an understanding as to why we use specific amounts of needles. And also, what order do you like to use your points?
I don't tend to worry too much about that. With 8 extraordinary vessels I do. So I do the opening point, couple points, and points on the specific 8 extras that I'm working on and then other points. But otherwise I don't tend to worry too much about that. From experience, there are points that I'm sure everyone knows are more likely to hurt than others. And I'm not going into the treatment expecting them to hurt, but I'm aware that there are some points, say on the feet or on the face, that are a little bit more nasty on average than others, and so I tend to leave the more likely to be nasty ones, good sentence, until the end. And it's a hygienic thing too, so feet, face, leave till sort of the end, typically. I used to put the sensitive ones in first, and then I felt like the patient was on edge and thought all of them would hurt all of the remaining needles. It took them a few minutes to sort of settle down afterwards, so I'm now doing it the other way around.
Okay, that's a good point there. Okay, and can we discuss the symmetry of the energy with the acupuncture points? I know you like to have sensible scattering.
Yeah, it's... I feel like... I mean, I know a lot of people don't necessarily read a lot of books or whatever, and that's fine. You know, everyone gets their continuing professional development points in different ways, but I just read so much, and I seem to find that on average a lot of the point combinations that people tell you to use will often have a lot of points all stacked in one spot. And I feel like that's not necessarily the best approach, because what if there's a stagnation either side of where you've stacked all your needles? So rather than putting them all in one place, I call it sensibly scatter the needles. So probably something in the legs, something in the arm, something in the trunk, maybe something in the head or the face. I feel like for me that works more holistically, and it also has the potential to work on channels in different parts of the body that are travelling in different directions, going to different areas, different organs. But it's not, I call it sensible scattering. It's not just putting needles in different parts of the body for the sake of it. David says put needles in all over the body, so I'll just throw them in wherever. That wouldn't be a sensible approach. So it's really looking at the combination of points as well. So I remember Lorne Brown once said to me, an Aristotle quote, "The whole is greater than the sum of its parts." And that's just perfect, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm interested in the points, as many of them as possible, communicating with one another. And sometimes if it does mean that points have to be stacked in one area, then I would consider it for the sake of the combination. But the reality is that that doesn't happen very often, because there are typically points that are in different parts of the body that will communicate, and that's the key to my acupuncture point combinations, is having as many points as possible talking to one another.
Okay. I guess we often try and choose a distal and local point when we're treating as an acupuncturist anyway, so that's another way of saying it. How do you choose points when you've got a patient that might be quite complex?
This was something that's I don't have any problem with accessing my point, which I think they call like heavenly soul or ethereal soul. I got that sorted. It's the ability to get that information that keeps popping into my head, grounded into my PO to action it. So I'm never short of ideas, or I'm never short of constructing thought processes and inspiration. And so when people, like Sandy, when you've asked that question, it's interesting, because it makes me think about how the processes happen for me. And the reality is that anytime I talk to anyone about any disorder, sign or symptom, the second that they give me a disorder or sign or symptom, points pop into my brain. And then they bumble around in there. And what happens is, when people, whether they're complex or not, every time they mention a condition, sign or symptom, new points jump in, points that aren't going to work anymore evaporate or leave. It's a process that just kind of happens in the brain, and then it goes down on paper. And so whether they're a fairly straightforward patient or they're complex, the process is the same. But when they're complex, that's when the point combination becomes even more crucial, because if there's a lot going on, I still don't think that adding any more needles above that sort of 16 is necessarily going to be any more beneficial. And in fact, if they're really complex or chronic, you might be wanting to aim more at the lower end, more like 8. So it's really vital that the points, more than ever, really do combine well. And so that's kind of how it works. And I guess in some ways it answers the question, and in some ways it doesn't, because it's opening up so many different ways you could actually approach that question. But in the end, it is very much about making sure that I get that combination really intact for them. And sometimes it is a little bit, it's not trial and error, but it's you're choosing what you think is the best thing you can do for your patient, but you can't always know exactly what's going to happen to them when they leave. And so you're using your experience, and then you're watching what happens after that treatment, and then you adapt. And then your points can change. Well, they have to stay the same every time they come in as well.
Okay. And are you creating a core TCM differential diagnosis and then developing point combinations based off that?
Yeah, I'm typically, because I was trained to do more of the Zung Fu patterns of disharmony, I will try to aim for that. I have been experimenting a lot more and learning a lot more about 5 diagnosis, 6 division, 4 level. There's a lot of other things out there that are possible. I would consider archetype systems if the patient is emotionally struggling, so that they get a better sense of maybe who they are as a person, which can really help their recovery. It's so amazing when patients realise that they're actually healing themselves, because a lot of them probably think that we're just going to make them better and they don't have to have anything to do with it. But the more that they realise that they're actively involved in their own healing, then that's quite affirming for them. Well, not everyone, but most patients do like to think that they have some sort of interest in their own health, if that makes sense. So, yeah. I don't even answer the question. Sorry, Sandy.
No, that's all right. I was just wondering if you can sort of bypass a differential diagnosis with, how you're saying you're calling in points, or points are coming to you as the patient sort of discussing. I know, obviously, it's very important, and as lecturers, you and I both know we need to get, especially our students, to learn to get a diagnosis and then come up with a treatment principle, and then come up with point combination. But, to be honest, and I think every experienced practitioner knows this, we use core points over and over again. So, at what point, if we bypass the diagnosis, do we still get those active results?
Yeah, look, that's very true, Sandy, and that is in part what happens with me too. As I said, if someone says to me, I get a headache, well, then points will pop into my head, large amounts of 4, orchestron 3, bladder 60, blah, blah, blah. And then they'll mention something else, like insomnia, or then heart 7 might pop in, peri 6, skin tank, and so on. And then it's about moulding that. And so that moulds with the diagnosis as well. So I do try to diagnose as accurately as I can, and then it's the merging of the diagnosis with the signs and symptoms, and that's sort of how it builds.
And I guess also with the acupuncture point combinations, it can be a very a quick go-to fix too. So potentially if information hasn't been gathered, if you haven't had enough time in the consultation, you haven't covered things, you sort of can use it as a quick guide as to where to go with your treatment.
Totally, and that's why that acupoint dictionary can work so well, because it doesn't necessarily have a diagnosis there, but it has points to treat a condition.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's a very valid point as well, Sandy. Yeah.
Okay, so can we dive into some of your favourite point combinations? I would say let's try and aim for about 10, if that's okay, because I know you've got literally textbooks full of them. But what would be your most commonly used and top 10 point combinations, starting from number 1?
Oh, in order.
Yeah, well, just your most used combination.
Yeah, look, probably it's a bit hard to go past the stomach 36, spleen 6 combo.
Okay, yep.
Granted, they're both on the legs, but they are so good at building deficiencies and building any deficiencies, really. And so they are definitely ones that I consider as being very, very important for any patient that's struggling with any form of deficiency. They would then be rounded out. Of course, if that was done bilaterally, that would only be 4 needles. So then I would add more depending on the diagnosis and the signs and symptoms. So
you use it like a core
as a combination. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of ways to look at the top 10 point combinations, in that I could give you an entire 8 to 16 needles as a combination, but the reality is a lot of the combinations grow off smaller combinations, and then points get added. So
yeah, that's a good way to
how I approach them.
That's definitely a good way to see it too, because I mean I use stomach 36, spleen 6 all the time. I do a lot of women and children's health and internal medicine. I don't do any pain, so obviously a lot of digestive stuff. So those points are used daily in my clinic, and I'll come up with other things that go into the treatment depending, liver 8 for blood deficiency or whatever. I'm using moxa, whatnot. So I think it's really nice to have those small core combinations, and then to be able to build depending on what we're seeing in treatment. So it actually, the smaller the better, I think.
Yeah. I get a lot of patients with a liver chi stagnation, or say stress, frustration, feeling overwhelmed, and that's leading into things like cyclical depression, a bit of anger, that type of thing. So another one I really like is liver 3, gallbladder 34, and peri 6 as a combo. Again, they're 3 different channels. They go in different directions. They're targeting different organs. They're all moving chi. And there's one in the foot, 2 needles, obviously bilaterally. You've got legs, and then you've also got in the arms. So that's, for me, sensible scattering.
Yep, okay.
But that's still not likely to be enough. So again, that's a kind of core idea based on those signs and symptoms, and then it would be rounded out with maybe something on the trunk or whatever else, depending on what they have.
So that one was for someone potentially with like a liver chi stagnation picture.
Yeah, and just the type of emotional stuff that's, your kind of stress levels are really high, you're feeling like you're not coping. And a lot of it comes down to the fact that the chi's just not moving smoothly. And when the chi's moving smoothly, we're able to achieve a lot more in the time that we have allocated for our work. We'll feel calmer, our hormones will be a little bit more regulated, and when you look at those points in a little bit more detail, they're also Shen karmas. So there's a lot more going on there, and so I find that to be a really nice combination for someone that's just really struggling to cope with their day-to-day activity.
Okay. Cool, yeah, that's a great combination. I haven't used that one. I probably have, but haven't used it as a combination. Okay, so what would be your third go-to point combination and why?
Hard to go past 4 gates,
yep.
Which again has liver 3 in it, and then large intestine 4. I talk about this idea that it's like a reset to factory settings, and I couldn't find it written anywhere for years and years, this idea that 4 gates calm you down, and to a point where the person almost just for a breath just almost falls asleep or goes into like a little consciousness thing where the body is able to just reset everything, and then it winds you back up again. So it's calming, relaxing, but then ultimately quite stimulating as well, which is why often when the person gets up off the table, they're actually quite doughy and, quite happy and a bit la-la, but then they wind back up again and they've got a lot of energy. And so for me, I feel like it's quite sedating and relaxing, but it's also quite stimulating and tonifying. And I know that that's a bit of a loaded conversation because a lot of your listeners will say it's one or the other, and so they won't use it for both those situations, but I find it to be really, really effective for that.
And are you tonifying or sedating when you needle, or are you just placing needles in and getting the chi, or how are you using your needle technique?
Yeah, I stick the needle in to the depth of where the chi is likely to be based on experience, based on point, based on how much flesh there is. So I do use different size needles, obviously, different lengths, different thicknesses. And I put it down into that sort of chi pocket, and sometimes I wiggle it to get chi, sometimes I just leave it. I do not twist a needle or lift and thrust a needle tonify or sedate. It goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Sandy, where I'm more interested in the combination of points doing a job for me. So the combo of points will tonify or sedate rather than instructing a needle to do something, because the combination will do it.
Yes, I'm a fan of that too. I don't like the chi stimulation. It doesn't feel great for myself when I do it, so I've always gone for a little bit more of a gentle approach and allow the chi to come to the needle, a bit like the Japanese. Okay, so point combination number 4.
This incorporates my favourite point, which doesn't mean that I do it all the time, because there are a number of patients that don't actually like it getting done on them, and that's do 20. And with it is yin tang. So it's a combination that I have in both my books, but I call it the crown and third eye combo. So do 20 and yin tang. And again, that's only actually 2 needles, and it's on the head and face. So something's going to almost certainly go somewhere else away from the head and the face. But I really love that combination, again, from experience. It's so calming. And for someone that's really emotional, whether it be a deficient emotion, an excess emotion, a stagnant emotion, the person just seems to feel really, really good with that combination in. And whether it's needled or even just pushed with your fingers, it's extremely relaxing and calming for the person. The only do 20, obviously, with some people, it does cause a little bit of energy to surge up into the head, and if they're excess, they might not like that feeling very much. But for me, do 20 can raise energy or drop energy, or do both in the same treatment. Good bike way, it's 100 meetings. It can move energy in any direction, and the combination will dictate what's going to happen there. Now, I run pretty yang, pretty excess, so I tend to have a lot of excess coming up into my head. And so do 20, if you're of the belief that it will raise energy only, then do 20 would be the worst point to needle on me. But I absolutely love it. It's extremely calming and relaxing, and it drops that excess energy out of my head, which it just wouldn't do if the point only took energy out the body. So
maybe
it's
you just
a loaded conversation, but I think I just love that combo.
Yeah, and maybe if you just had excess heat in the head, you just wouldn't moxer it. But I know one of my friends actually trained in Sri Lanka 25 years ago, and you walk into the clinic and they do 20 in, and then they say, how can I help? Yeah, that's brilliant, Sandy, because I do sometimes. Patients are just really, really charged, and they can't answer my questions, and I can't really do the interview. Up on the table, do 20 yin tang, and then I stand there and we do the interview while those needles are in. Cool. So I agree. That wasn't with Anton Jayasuriya or whatever his name was. He had a few books out for years and years. I nearly went to Sri Lanka and studied with him after I graduated, actually. Somewhere in Colombo. I'm not too sure where. Okay, yeah. Okay. All right. And because the 20 is my favourite, I've got another combo with it in it. Cool. So do 20 in kidney 1. Oh, yeah. Now, that one is a massive regulator of energy up and down the body because of having the highest and lowest points that we have in our body. So do 20 highest, kidney 1 lowest. It also makes, if you needle kidney 1 bilateral, makes what's called a triangle of power, or a triangle of influence, or a pyramid of influence. It's a combination I talk about in one of my books. And it's very good at regulating energy above and below, in and out, left and right, front and back. It's a really, really cool combination. But that's one that will regulate energy up and down. And look, I know that some of your listeners will be a bit hung up on that combination. For do 20, we've already talked about that. Kidney 1, look, it can hurt when you needle it. There's no getting around that. There's different strategies. Some people push the point with their thumb really hard and then stick the needle in. Some people use thick needles. Some people use thin needles. Some bash the needle in. Some tap it in very gently. Look, it's just, I've not found anyone that can get that needle in from kidney 1 every single time without it hurting. But it doesn't hurt very much. It doesn't hurt very often. And it's just about this belief that you're not going to hurt the person when you stick the needle in. Kidney 1 was one of the ones I used to practice on my sister when I was at college, using the big, 0.25s. Now I just use little serums of facial acupunctures on it, because I actually use that point combination a lot in males, because I see men for fertility. So I find it a great one for the yang. Yes. Yeah, so you just go with the finer needles. It doesn't hurt if you just get the smaller needle, gentle, approach into it. You don't need to use a big needle and get the patient to jump. That makes them, it defeats the whole purpose, raising their cortisol. Yeah, some people go from liver 3 through to kidney 1 with a deeper style of needle. I mean, that's okay, but liver 3 sometimes hurts too. Yeah. So are you really getting any less likelihood of pain by doing it that way? Maybe not. It's, interesting one. Yeah, no. Great point combination there for... That is, I think, 6, David. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right.
I really like Heart 7. It's in my top 5 favourite points. So it needs a combo. So I've got a Heart 7 Spleen 6 Yin Tang combo. Bilaterally, that's 5 needles. You've got something in the hands, something in the legs, and something in the face. And they all chat to one another. They're all Shen Karmas. They're good tonics, but they're just, again, because I treat a lot of mental and emotional stuff, I've just found this to be another beauty. It's also a core formula for insomnia. And, you know, with some people with insomnia, they're not getting that charge of hormones that they need. So when they wake in the day, you know, their hormones aren't working properly, and so they're impacted more emotionally. So that in itself suggests that it's going to help sleep, but it's also going to help with hormones that assist you with your emotion balancing. Things like endorphins, for example.
Okay.
So, yeah, I really like that one. Again, it's only 5 needles, so I might do more to get it up a bit more, but not doing extra points for the sake of getting within that 8 to 16 needle range. They get what I believe to be the most appropriate treatment at that point in time. So
okay.
That would be a combination I'd start with, and we'd potentially grow off that if needed.
Now, would that point combination be more directed at females?
It is, when you look at it, a logical one for females more than males, but I've found that to be quite effective as well for males. I know that there's a kind of idea that at some points would change depending on whether they're male or female. I've read lots of books that say sub out spleen 6 to bring in stomach 36 if you want to make it more of a male-based treatment. But, you know, I don't worry too much about that. Again, if it seems to be the best treatment for a person regardless of sex, I'll use it.
Okay. Do you have a name for that point combination?
Not that one, no.
Okay. All right. You'll need to get one.
Yes.
All right, point combination number 8.
Okay, I really like a combination of stomach 36 and large intestine 10. Now, this combination has almost the same name in Pinyin. So you have Susan Li, stomach 36, and you have Shosan Li for large intestine 10. So the San Li is the same. The ZU means foot or leg, and Sho means arm or hand. And then San is 3, and then Li is translated as miles. It's like a distance. So it's basically 3 leg miles or 3 arm miles. But the thing about it is they tend to work in different ways. Stomach 36 tends to move energy back to the organs to make more energy, whereas large intestine 10 tends to send energy away from the organs, which will use it up. But it'll be really good for things like musculoskeletal problems that are in the limbs. And just because it's on the arms, it also treats the legs. So it will do things like arthritis, do things like tennis elbow, wrist problems, but it'll also do problems with the knees, legs, circulation issues, Raynaud's disease, a range of different things. But it's what I call a limb flusher, large intestine 10. So by moving energy away from the organs, it will burn it up. Stomach 36 will be then the reverse by moving energy back to the organs to make more. So the combination works in different ways, but they work together to make sure that it's not too draining, and that what you get from the tonifying of stomach 36 can be used also if needed to flush the extremities. So an example of why you'd use something like that would be, say, a person is kidney deficient and they have, say, osteoarthritis or something like that in their knees, or they've got problems with their ankles or something like that. You're tonifying the kidney deficiency, but then you're also treating the joint arthritic issue. but you're not causing them to become more deficient for the sake of making their musculoskeletal problem better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually use that point combination a lot with children, but I'm using it more for immune dysfunction, asthma or eczema or that sort of stuff because, I use that point combination quite a lot in clinic. It's very effective. I haven't used it for any of those indications you've just described, but, it's a great combination there for kids too, just to add on.
Yeah, it is. It's a terrific combination, and it's allowing for energy to really move anywhere in the entire body if the potential is there as well. So it's very, very good. Yeah,
and kids are just usually one ball of stagnant heat. So it certainly fits in there with your description there. Okay, cool. Does that one have a name?
It doesn't, but it is a pinyin combination based on the names being almost the same. So in my second book, there's a discussion about that type of combination.
Okay, cool.
Based on the pinyin similarity.
All right, awesome. How about point combination number 9?
Okay, this one has a name. It's called 3 yin sixes.
Oh, yep, I know this one.
3 yin sixes. Now, that means that there's 3 points, and they're all yin points, and they all tonify yin, and they're all number 6. So they are heart 6, flame 6, kidney 6. So 3 yin sixes, heart 6, flame 6, kidney 6. So as I said, they're all on yin channels, they're all yin organs, and they all tonify yin. And so obviously, if the person is not yin deficient, they wouldn't necessarily use it. But it's, you will see potentially quite a few people with yin deficiency, especially females that are going through menopause, for example. But that's a great combination for that particular issue.
That's one of the combinations that stuck with me that you taught me in college. So I've used it for 15 years or so. How good's that?
Yeah.
And I've taught many students that combination. Passed it on.
And then someone taught me that too. So it's like this ongoing, someone teaches me, then I teach someone, and then you'll teach someone.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
The cycle of acupuncture. Okay, cool. So
that's right.
The 3 yins, I love it. Okay, so that was number 9. Number 10.
This one is called the original yin and yang, or yuan yin and yang combination. So it's Ren 4 and Ren 6.
Okay, another great one.
So yuan yin and yang, or original yin and yang. Because yuan is often translated as original or primary or first. So Ren 4 and Ren 6 together, you've got points that their pinyin name gives you an indication of what they do. So Ren 4 is Guan Yuan, so that's original passage, and that's working specifically on your original qi, so your jing. But that does so much more because your original qi actually has the capacity to also be important for tonifying your core qi that your body's using, but also blood, yin and yang as well. And then Ren 6 is Qi high, so Sea of Qi. But it's also not just tonifying Qi, it can tonify Yang, Yin and blood. So the combination is going to tonify basically any form of deficiency that you have. But the term of it, the name that it's given is this Yuan, Yin and Yang. So its name implies more original qi, yin and yang, but it's going to tonify everything, and it's a very, very good regulator of the kidney energy as well. So I actually use those 2 needles or 2 points often instead of gallbladder 25, which is the front move point of the kidneys. I use Ren 4 and 6 instead of gallbladder 25 a lot of the time. I find those 2 points actually work better than gallbladder 25 does. Or do both, Ren 4 and Ren 6 and gallbladder 25. So yeah, that's almost my go-to instead of gallbladder 25 to put the kidneys if the person's face up.
Yeah, right. That's certainly a point combination I use a lot in clinic too, so definitely get some results there. Okay, so there we have David's top 10 point combinations, and I'll make sure to put all your links in the show notes to any of your books and webinars for our listeners that want more information about point combinations. David, if we have time, can we just maybe touch on the 8 extras?
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And I've been thinking about this, how to answer this question quickly, because I do workshops on this, and the workshops can be, 5-6 days long.
Yeah.
Just on 8 extras. So, but again, it's look, I find it to be truly remarkable topic to discuss in regards to Chinese medicine. Again, it's a loaded topic because some of your listeners probably don't give the 8 extras much value. When I was taught it, I actually had a lecturer who basically poo-pooed them, said that they didn't work, and they said they had to teach it. And in my it was 3 years full-time back then. It's now 4 years full-time in Australia, a bachelor degree, but I got 6 hours. Our cohort got 6 hours of 8 extraordinary vessels in 3 years.
Mm.
And we had a teacher that didn't believe that it did anything. So at the end of it, I graduated and I went, righto, fair enough, the 8 extras don't work. And pretty much ignored them for a number of years. And then just before I started teaching you, Sandy, I was teaching a class at the Stones Corner College, and I got given a subject I hadn't taught before, and I came across that I had to teach the 8 extras. And I went, oh no, they don't work. How am I supposed to teach something that doesn't work? Maybe I could just leave it out of the curriculum. No. And I went, no, I can't do that. I've got to teach it. So I went, you know what, let's learn about it. I got an opinion from my teacher who I really liked, and I backed his view that they didn't work. But I had a look into the literature and found that a lot of what everyone was saying was that that the 8 extras actually were quite remarkable. And so through that research led me to be able to teach the subject, led me to start to use the 8 extras on myself, on friends, family, patients, and just the results. Like, again, we don't have time, but some of the more extraordinary results from patients were done using the 8 extras. And so I have no doubts in my mind that they're remarkable in what they do. And I guess it makes sense when you think about them, because they're coming from that core level. You're at the point of your conception, you get your ancestors' energy, you get your mum and dad's energy, and it becomes this little sort of Dantian ball that becomes your kidneys, and you grow off that. Your 8 extras start there. So the ability to get to that genetic information is key.
And that's right.
That's stuff that you can achieve with that.
That's how I always associate it with it, getting to that core genetic component, or the DNA, or the Jing, however we want to call it. And they're such a great lot of point combinations. They can't be forgotten. And I think it is something in college that gets taught really fast, as many things do, and then sort of forgotten about. But perhaps we can have you on another time and go into some depth about the 8 extraordinaries.
Yeah, no, I would love to. I actually had thought my last book, which I guess we'll talk about shortly, I was going to be just on the 8 extras. But interestingly, a number of other authors around the world produced some 8 extras books right around that time. Yvonne Farrell put one out, David Hartmann put one out, and so the publishing company said, look, it's a bit of a saturated market for 8 extras at the moment, so let's just hold off on that. Yeah,
okay.
So maybe on track, maybe.
But I love what you're doing anyway with your original kind of point combinations that you create too, because they're so easy to use, they're so accessible, and they can cover a lot more than just the 8 extras. So I think what you're doing, what you wrote your book on, was the right thing to do.
Yeah, that's right. There are no mistakes.
That's right. Okay, we'll maybe come back to the 8 extras at another point, but is there any last things you want to add in that we, whether to do with point combinations or positioning or anything that we haven't covered that you want to touch base on?
I think this was a good little snapshot. It's very hard to. It wouldn't matter how long we did the podcast for, Sandy. We'd always not be able to cover everything, and so this has been a good chance to, I guess, introduce me to people that don't know me, but also just the idea of point combinations. I think for me, I guess it's people will often say, "So what?" to acupuncture point combinations. Why does it even matter? We've got books that'll tell us what to do, so why do we have to worry about the points? Because presumably the points that are in that book are ones you can use and they'll work. But it's a bit like the question you asked me earlier, like if you get a complex patient and they're not just a nice, easy point selection process because they've got multiple things going on, lots of signs and symptoms going on, and then you go, well, now I've got to go to lots of different places in books and I don't really know where to start. And so we've taken away that ability in you in some ways when we teach you, do this, do this, do this. We take away your free will, your ability to work it out yourself. And so I really wanted to build these acupuncture point combination books, the workshops that I do I want to build it around this idea that when you come to the workshops or you read my book, that at the end of it, you've got that free will. You've got the ability to construct your own treatments regardless of what your patient has wrong with them, how chronic they are, or whatever. Instead of having to rely on other people's opinions, you can rely on your own opinion. So that was really important that I got that across to people. It doesn't matter how many years you've been doing acupuncture, you can always be better than you are. And that's what this book is designed to do, is make you the best possible acupuncturist you can be.
Totally. Okay, and what book are you referring to, just for our listeners if they want to reach out and check out some of your books?
So the one that you mentioned before was the first one that I wrote, which was back in early 2000s, as I said, around that time that I taught you, Sandy. So that became a self-published book, and then Elsevier Church of Livingston liked the look of it, and so I did a second edition, and that's the one that you were holding up. So it came out in 2009. So that book is called Acupoint Dictionary, 2E, as in second edition. And that one there's over 1,000 disorders and there's point combinations. So that's where you just get given the information. So it's a nice, easy one in clinic if you've got patients that come in to see you that maybe you didn't know what points to use, or you've got points in your mind and you're looking for a few extras. So it just gives you the information. And if you want to learn more later, there's references for each of the combinations. The second book, which I wrote just in the last few years, is called The Principles and Practical Application of Acupuncture Point Combinations. It's wordy, but essentially it's about what I said before. It's teaching you how to construct your own acupuncture point combinations. So it's coming at it from two different directions. The one book from me will just give you the information, and the other one will teach you how to do it yourself. And so that's the differences between the two. And there's heaps and heaps of combinations in the new book as well, so that you don't just get left high and dry where I'll say work this out yourself. I'll still give you an option, and then you can adjust the treatment based off your own experience, based off your own preferences for points. Do 20 is a perfect example. I've got Do 20 in my combinations a bit in both books, but if you don't like Do 20, well, what do you use instead? So it's that free will. Sub it out, take Do 20 out, put something else in. But the new book is about making you feel confident that you've taken that point out and put a good point in its place, instead of just random selections that may or may not work in the overall treatment.
Okay, great. And now you present a bit for, is it Healthy Seminars and ATMS? You got some webinars or some resources out. If people don't want to go and purchase a book or get another book, it's also such a great way to learn now is webinars. It's So easy. You can put them on and walk away and cook dinner and listen and learn.
That's true. Yeah, so I've got a number of platforms, so Healthy Seminars, eLotus, TSTM Academy, China Books, Singing Dragon, which is the publisher of my second book. They have some content that they've started to do online as well. I'm also, when the world opens up again, I'll be going back and doing workshops around the world. But I'm doing some live ones in Australia in the first half of this year as well. But you're right, Sandy, the online stuff works. I guess there's a limit, and you would agree that it's all well and good to get the theory, but let's stick some needles in people and practice what we've been taught. And so you'll get the theory from me online, but if you come to a workshop live, you get a bit of theory, then you do the prac. And so you're constantly up and needling people, getting needled, watching other people needle, learning through practical experience as well. So there's a lot of information out there. I've got a free blog that I haven't posted in for about a year, but there's quite a bit there. And as I said, it's free. And I've got a free 1.5 hour recording that I've sent out to as many people as I can think of around the world on the acupuncture point combination topic. So I'm not sure how you access your brew, Sandy, but I could potentially send you the link for that, and maybe your audience can access a copy of that as well.
Okay, that would be great.
Or through you.
Great, that would be awesome. So we'll make sure to put links to, your books and your courses and webinars or your website all in the show note for any of our listeners. You can access that through the show note.
Yep.
David, it's been so good having you on, and you've given us a great depth of knowledge and some really clinical relevant point combinations that we can go and use today as a student or as a experienced practitioner. So I really appreciate your time, and hopefully you wouldn't mind blocking out some time in the near future to perhaps dive more into the 8 extras, because I love them, and also some of your Shen stuff, because I know that's certainly one of the things I remember you by. And if you've been doing it for the last 15 years as in depth as you were doing it back then, I can imagine your wealth of knowledge is huge. So I hope we can have you back on for a further chat on that.
Yeah, that would be lovely, Sandy. I appreciate you giving me the opportunity. It's been lovely.
No worries. Thanks so much, David.
Thanks, Sandy. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening. I have been a practitioner of naturopathic and Chinese medicine for over a decade. I have a master's degree of health science, and I am an academic lecturer at Australia's leading natural medicine college. I am available worldwide online for bookings. Simply go to sandyrosshealth.com.